As we navigate this crazy world, we must search for the truth. Then we can discover and empower ourselves to live as a free individual. Join Tammy on Journey for Truth.
Hello and welcome to Journey for Truth on iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spotify, and other platforms. Thank you for joining me. I am Tammy Urbanic. Journey for Truth is always on a mission to talk to different people, hear their stories, and really explore a variety of difficulties and overcoming certain things, but also exploring truth and sharing that information with all the listeners and viewers. This week's guest is Robert Crown. Robert experienced significant hardship in his youth, his teenage years, his adult years, but he was able to really turn that around. Robert, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Tammy. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, you have mentioned that your mother tried to murder you and your siblings. What happened with that?
Well, I grew up in a dysfunctional family, and my parents had a hard time from the get-go. My mother started having kids when she was very young and, 16 years old, and they ended up living with, my father's parents, and the situation in the house wasn't very good. So that lasted for a few years, and then they moved out on their own. But she really couldn't handle all the problems that were coming from the in-laws, and basically took it out on us. So, one day we were at, she told us to stay home from school because we were going to go see a show, and she had plotted out this whole scheme to murder me and my two siblings. Basically what happened is that she said that we were going to go see a show, and she was going to go out and get gas for the car, and then when she'd get back, we would leave for the show.
Mm-hmm.
So what she did was back the car in the garage and close the overhead door and come in, and then she went upstairs and she offered us some ice cream. And in the ice cream, we didn't know it at the time, obviously, but she put some sleeping pills in the ice cream. And then we went downstairs to eat our ice cream, and then my mom came down with a blanket, a hammer and nails draped over her arm. And I asked her, what's that for, Mommy? And she said, well, it's a surprise for your daddy when he comes home from work.
Jeez.
And she started nailing the blanket up against the doorway. And the surprise, of course, was the three dead children laying on the basement floor. And so she went out after she nailed the blanket up. She started the car and went out the back access door. We didn't see her again. So the fumes started billowing in from the garage. And and I told my mom, I said, hey, can we go now? I think the car's warm. And, I'm 11 years old at the time, and I have a younger sibling and an older sibling that was down there with me. And they're laying on the floor this time, feeling pretty uncomfortable. And I can start tasting, the filthy carbon monoxide in my mouth, and it coated the inside of my nose, and my eyes are burning. And then I had this thought pop into my mind, and the thought was, this is what death feels like. You are going to die. And it was pretty unusual, and I didn't really even give it a second thought, but I wasn't scared or I wasn't frightened. And I just closed my eyes and went to sleep for what I thought was going to be the last time. And then I don't know how long after that, after I closed my eyes, but I heard this voice inside my head, and it said, get up and go for the door. Go for the door. And so I just stood up obediently. And by this time, I was intoxicated by the fumes, and I didn't really have very good balance, but I tried to make my way to that door like a staggering drunk. It seemed like it took forever. When I came and approached my younger and older sister laying on the basement floor, now lifeless, I wanted to stop and help them, but I knew if I did, it would be the death of us all. So I thought the best thing to do was just keep making my way for that door. Well, to make a long story short, I finally made it across the basement floor, got up the steps of the garage, and finally fumbling with the door. Of course, that's the door that sticks in the house, right? So
Right.
I got the door, I got the door finally open, and then I'm basically standing on the threshold of life and death right there. And I'm like, nobody's going to hear me, I'm not going to make it. And I just, with every ounce of energy I had left, I just screamed for help, like, help. But that's about as loud as it came out. And I looked around, and, we have a 6-foot privacy fence in our backyard. And I'm thinking, like, nobody's going to hear me. There's nobody outside, and it's totally quiet. I mean, this is like in the 70s, right? So I decided again to yell for help. And with every ounce of strength that I had left in my body, I just gave it all I had and just help. But it wasn't loud enough to wake a sleeping baby. And
Mm.
then I felt this piercing grip around both of my arms. And then somebody began to shake me violently, screaming, "Robert, Robert." And my eyes weren't clear, so I couldn't make it out. And I did recognize the voice. And when I finally did focus my eyes, I saw that it was my mother. And I kind of freaked out. And I had these flurry of thoughts just race through my mind, like, where have you been? Why did you leave me? Why did you let this happen to me? And then the grave reality set in, and I thought she was going to like finish me off, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But that was enough to pop her out of it. And she went inside and called my dad. And, the rest is history, as they say. My sisters were fine. I ended up fine. Um, you
So,
know,
so 1 second. So she went through all of that to murder you and your siblings just to change her mind?
well, I think she was in a state of mind, an altered state of consciousness at the time. And she was in such a state where, nothing else, nothing else could come in. I don't know what the exact medical term is, or psychological term, but yeah, I don't know what they call it. But she was in an altered state of consciousness. So the fact that when I was able to get out of that back door and I started to scream for help, and then she saw me and started shaking me, and it kind of woke her up out of the trance that she was in.
Hmm.
And that was enough for her to go back in and call my dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after she uh, bounced back, let's say, for lack of a better phrase, how did she respond to you? Was she remorseful, or was she nonchalant?
At the time, she wasn't very remorseful. I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm sure she probably felt bad. I would hope she did. But she went to hospital for a few months. As far as my dad and my siblings go, and we didn't have any counseling at all back
Oh.
then. So, as you can imagine, something like that kind of event like that, and I was a sickly kid. I mean, I had asthma really bad. I'm sure it was from the vaccines that I got when I was younger. And I got, I had to stay in for summers. I had allergies. I used to get shots all the time. So it was pretty difficult for me to go through all that, and not having any counseling for anybody. I mean, what it does to your psyche about yourself and your own self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, it totally obliterates it.
I would
And
imagine.
yeah, and the thing is that you don't even know it when you're growing up. All of a sudden you're in all this trouble. Things don't work out for you. The way that you think is wrong. You stop learning because you can't comprehend anymore. So
Mhm.
your whole life is basically falling apart on you, and you don't really understand why it's all happening. So it's really quite difficult. Was quite difficult.
Exactly, and that was actually leading into my next question, that it must have really had a devastating effect on your sense of self-worth, your value as a human being, but also as someone's son. How did that manifest itself, that perception of self-worth? How did that manifest itself in your teen years?
Yeah, it was really difficult because relationships were very hard. It's kind of like if your own mother wants to kill you. I mean, and she's the one that's supposed to love you and nurture you and take care of you. I mean, who can you really trust, right? I mean, who do you think loves you? I mean, why would you love yourself? I mean, these aren't things that I was thinking consciously then, but I'm sure my subconscious was just like going through a plethora of scenarios of, who are you? Why should you love yourself? Why should you be worthy? Yeah, it affects every aspect. It affects your relationships. It affected my learning. Definitely your self-confidence, your self-esteem. Um, you always feel like you're not good enough. I always kind of felt like an outsider. I felt alone. I felt reclusive at this time, times depressed, um, not wanted. I always felt like I was a burden or, kind of like the odd man out, so to speak. You never feel like you fit in.
Did your dad try to resolve what happened? Did he try to make up for it, I guess is the best way I can put it?
No, my dad had his own issues. My dad would drink, and he couldn't deal with anything either. I mean, he had a tough childhood himself, and they would fight and argue. I mean, they would physically fight sometimes and argue. They would hit us. So it wasn't a good family life, really.
Oh. Now, you also ran away at some point.
Yes. A couple years, I don't know, 3, 4 years later, I had a friend over. We decided to take my mom's car, and that's just one of the things. Another thing, what it was, is that I would rebel against authority. I wouldn't respect authority at all. So I'd
Mhm.
had absolutely no respect for authority. So we took my mom's car out for a joyride, and I'm 15 years old, don't even have my driver's license or know how to drive a car. And we ended up getting away from home about 7, 8 miles, and I ended up totaling the car out with me and my
Oh,
friend in it. Fortunately, we were okay, but right at the scene of the accident in Lake Zurich, Illinois, there I decided to hitchhike all the way down to Florida with $20 in my pocket. I told my friend, I'm not going home because my mom might kill me, and I'm not going to go there to find out. So I decided I was going to take off. So I hitchhiked down to Florida, made it down there in like 24 hours. And I got down there. I met this guy down there at the McDonald's, and he said, "Where's your parents, kid?" And I said, "I don't, my parents aren't here." He said, "Oh, you're runaway." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Let me buy you a bus ticket and I'll send you back home." And I said, "No, I just came from home. I'm not going back." And he says, "If you stay down here, you're gonna age." And I didn't know what the heck the guy was talking about.
mhm.
And but after when I left, I understood exactly what he was talking about. So while I was down there, my money obviously didn't last, and I basically slept on the beach a little bit. And then this guy I met later, who's actually a drug dealer, and started setting me up with pot to sell down on the boardwalk, because he said, if you want to stay at my place, you got to earn your keep. So he would put me up at the place and give me some money, but I would have to go around selling pot on the boardwalk to tourists and stuff. Then while we were doing that, we got robbed at gunpoint, and I was also sexually abused a number of times when I was down there. And after about 3 months, I decided I got out of there and I headed back home.
That sounds horrid.
Yeah, right.
That sounds
Yeah,
so traumatizing.
yeah.
And
So when kids talk to me about running away, they don't really have an idea or think it through, like what's really going to happen, because most kids that run away, they don't know what's really going on in the world. And I was lucky, really, considering that I was only sexually abused compared to what you can hear today about all the human trafficking and the satanic ritual abuse and stuff. So I think I was very fortunate, because there was a time down there where I think that was going to happen. This guy took me to this house, a very large, expensive beach house on the coast of Florida. And there was early in the morning, and there was a man there with a cocktail in his hand in a bathrobe. And this man looked like an actor. that I've seen on TV before. And now knowing what I know by actors, that I'm sure it was very possible.
Hmm.
But something happened in that. I don't know what the guy was saying, but to him, I don't know if he was trying to sell me or something like that. But the guy came up to me and he slapped me and he goes, "You shit." And I think he did that because this guy abused me first. I don't know, but I think that's why maybe I wasn't able to go with him or something. I don't know, but it really worked out the benefit for me because I believe that that situation right there, if I would have stayed there, I think that would have been the end of me. So even though it was a bad situation, there's always good in everything. So it was fortunate for me that I got out of there with
Yes.
the few little bruises and scars that I did.
Yes, exactly. And you are absolutely correct that it could have been worse in terms of human trafficking, being sold and really having no way of escaping, or being very, very difficult to escape. And human trafficking back then wasn't as talked about as it is
Right,
now. I think more people are on the lookout, generally speaking, not everyone, of course, that as compared to back then. But all of this trauma rolled into more trauma and more trauma and more trauma.
right,
Trauma tends to repeat itself until it's healed. So you began with trauma. It sounds like even before your mother attempted to murder you, it sounded like a difficult childhood trauma there, and then a major trauma with what your mother did, and then the running away and the sexual abuse.
right.
How did that continued trauma lead you into your adult years?
Well, it kind of stayed with me because I didn't really understand it, really what was happening yet. I mean, I really didn't put it together for a while, and and it just kept happening too. Because when I was 19, I fell in love for the first time, and it was really a great relationship. I dated this woman for 10 months, and I really felt the love from her, and I really loved her. It was something that I wasn't really getting at home or wasn't able to give. So it was really something that was really comforting to me and really the bright spot in my life. And I decided I wanted to marry this woman because, I wanted to spend my life with her because she was really good to me and I really loved her. And so she always wanted to go up to Wisconsin to drink, because the drinking age was 1 year, a little bit younger than it was in Illinois at the time. So as soon as I got the phone call from my best friend asking us that day if we wanted to go up to Wisconsin, I went up. My girlfriend Carol happened to be over, so I went up to my room to ask her, if she wanted to go upstairs to Wisconsin. And at the time, we were just hanging out, having a good time. And as soon as I asked her, the whole mood in the room changed. It just took a turn like 180 degrees. And my girlfriend's mother was like a clairvoyant and intuitive, and I didn't realize that at the time. So was my girlfriend. I didn't understand anything about vibrations
Mhm.
and intuitiveness or empathy or all of that stuff. So when I looked at her, I mean, I saw this look in her eyes, and I knew something terrible was going to happen. And I just kind of ignored it like a coincidence, right? Just a crazy coincidence. So we went up to Wisconsin, and I sat behind the driver up there. We had another friend from work go, and then Carol and I sat in the back. So she sat behind the passenger. So we decided to come home early that night because to avoid all the people that were drinking on the road.
Right.
But we were about 8 miles away from home when this other driver pulled alongside of us, and it was kind of taunting us. So if we'd slow down, he would slow down. If we'd speed up, he'd speed up. And he basically swerved over into our lane. Fortunately, my friend missed him, saw it coming, and missed him. And then intentionally, the second time, he did the same thing. But this time, he got us. And then we were on the highway. We went across this median, and then boom, right into oncoming traffic. We got broadsided.
Oh, geez.
So the thing about this whole scenario is that on the way on the way out of the bar, we couldn't find my girlfriend, and she was standing by the car behind the driver's side with her head down and her hand on the door handle. And when I looked at her, I saw this crazy feeling come over me again, and I had that feeling something was going to happen. And when we got in that accident, I just remember laying in the median, somebody yelling at me, "Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt?" And then I woke up in surgery, and the guy said, "Okay, you got a broken femur. You want rods in your legs or traction for 6 months?" And I said, "Rods." And then I woke up a couple of days later in the hospital, and I asked where my friends were, and the nurse said, "I don't know of any of your friends." So I decided to call my girlfriend up to find out where she was. I figured she probably went home. So I call her on the phone, and her sister picks up, and I go, "Hey, is Carol there?" And she goes, "You murderer! You killed my sister!"
Oh, man.
So I go, "What the hell is that?" And I hung up the phone and called my mom. And then my mom said, "I'll be right over." And then as soon as my mom got to the doorway, she started crying. And then I could see that, I knew it was real. And I said, "What happened to Carol?" And she said, "She didn't make it.
Oh,
She was killed." And I said, "Well, what about Bob, my best friend?" And she says, "He was killed too." And so, yeah, it kind of keeps going. You know what I mean?
absolutely. The trauma just keeps
Yeah,
building
yeah,
from there.
that's
But
right.
at some point, you had a turning point. Where was your turning point where you essentially decided, whether consciously or otherwise, but essentially decided you no longer wanted to experience or were going to experience trauma?
Well, I don't know if it was exactly like I don't want to experience trauma. It actually took me a really long time to figure it out, because I didn't really start to figure it out until later on in life, until until not too long ago, actually. I mean, I knew I had some issues with me that wasn't right. Why did all these paradigms happen in my life?
Right.
Because when you go through trauma like that, you compartmentalize it.
Mhm.
So then when it gets compartmentalized, then there's like a trigger sometimes that will set it off, and then you'll get those same feelings again, and you'll react in the same way.
Mhm.
So I've seen this happen a couple of times in my life, and I realized, hey, something's going on here. And so I kind of had to figure it out for myself, but it didn't happen for a long time. I mean, I ended up getting married when I was 25, had 4 kids, grew up, and then later on, it didn't really happen, and didn't really start to think about stuff until 2007, about really trying to put everything together and behind me. And that point at 2007, that's when I was homeless with my wife and 4 kids. And that was the time when I was the turning point really for me, is when I really had to stop and face stuff and really take a look at why am I attracting all this negative stuff in my life.
Exactly.
And this was really the beginning of the turning point for me. Now I'm a slow learner, so it probably took me a lot longer than most people, but hey,
Everyone's
that's
at
just
their own
me.
pace. Everyone's at their own pace, right?
Yeah, so like people don't worry about that. You got your own thing going. It doesn't have to take you long. It doesn't have to be that long. It doesn't have to be a burden. So you can take care of it a lot sooner, a lot faster. Um, but yeah, that was the major turning point for me. My friend of mine gave me the movie The Secret, and it really made me think about the way I use my thoughts.
Hmm.
And then from there, yeah, things just started to get progressively better. And yeah, that was the major turning point there.
Exactly. I think everyone comes to a point where they, or at least most people come to a point where they look at their patterns and they decide, I keep making the same choices, or I keep having these same outcomes, or I keep
Right,
experiencing the same thing over and over, and I just don't want that anymore.
right.
So, not that people want to experience trauma, but there's a tendency for people to just keep making the same choices,
Right.
keep having the same experience, and they decide, I no longer want that experience and
Right.
I have to do something different. And for you, that it sounds like that was your turning point of homelessness. And you were what, like 44, 45 at the time?
Yeah, right around there. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're coming to that place of something has to change. So it sounds like that you began really looking at your thoughts and how your thoughts were at least partly contributing to your reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really learned a lot about my thoughts. I really studied a lot about my thoughts and paradigms. Those things that repeat in your life are all paradigms. Those are all programs that are running in our subconscious mind.
Hmm.
And everybody has them, so if you have any pattern, in relationships or at work or with friends or family, things that repeat themselves, these are paradigms. They're programs that are running in your subconscious mind. And in order to change those programs, you got to rewire your subconscious mind. And there's different ways that you can do that. It doesn't have to be difficult. You can do it through repetition. You can do it through visualization, through emotion. There's different ways that you can do it, but you need to do it because it won't go away by itself. They will keep
Okay.
repeating itself because it's kind of like on your computer, right? So every time you open up your computer and turn it on, the operating system is running.
Hmm.
So if you want a new operating system, you want to update it, you have to get an upgrade for that operating system for it to run properly. So the same thing with our subconscious. If you want to change your life, you have to reprogram your subconscious or do the things in your life that are going to make that change possible. Now, I learned a lot about our mind and how our minds work, at least for a layman here. um, One of the things I realized is that our minds are really programmed as a disadvantage, everybody's. There was a study that came out in 2005 by the National Science Foundation, and they stated that we have between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. And out of those
Believe it.
thoughts, 80% of those thoughts are negative.
I believe that too.
95% are from the day before. So how are we going to change if we keep having the same thoughts day in and day out? What's the definition of insanity, right?
Hmm.
But the thing is that that's not even the real question here. Is what society really has to understand is the question that needs to be asked is, how did we get to think so negatively to begin with?
Hmm.
Where is that coming from? TV, movies, our environment, everything around us that we take in, it's programming us in a negative way so that we don't feel good about ourselves. And it's really kind of a horrific thing if you think about it, because most people, I know people in this world that are singers, that are um, wrote academic books, that have all sorts of degrees, that don't love themselves, that don't believe in themselves, or that they have insecurity issues. So we're all like that. That's the way that we're um, made or designed to feel about ourselves in that way.
Or yeah,
That's
programmed in some cases.
programmed, exactly. We're programmed to think that way. So that's what's happening on the outside to us without even us knowing it. The subliminal things that they put in movies and shows and stuff like that, all of this is just to make us not good enough. We're not smart enough. We're not thin enough,
Hmm.
all of these things, always. It's like we can never match up to what it is, right? So we always feel like lack. And then when we're in a vibration of lack, or we're not feeling good, and we're in any kind of negative vibration, depression, jealousy, whatever you want, um, our vibration is lower. So when we're in a lower vibration, we cannot change, no matter how much we want to change. So when I was homeless, I'm thinking, okay, I watched The Secret. I can do this. I'm going to manifest me something, right? And this is the thing, what people don't get. This is the missing part of that whole movie. Is like, it's like you don't understand this, but when you're in a vibration of lack, you're thinking, like, even though you want to say, okay, I'm going to manifest a new car or something like that, but if you're in that vibration of lack and you're feeling lack, even though you're thinking positive, it's never going to happen, you know. So you have to go to a happy place. You got to raise your vibration up, elevate your vibration. And when you're in that elevated vibration of love, joy, and bliss, now that's the time when you can create a new reality for yourself. And this is the biggest thing, what I'm finding out more and more. And every time I look into stuff, and I don't look into stuff like normal people. I mean, I go like down the rabbit hole of stuff. To remote influencing, to remote viewing, and other things. I look into secret space programs and see what they're training, how they're training some of these people. And the other day I was just watching something too about like our thoughts and how powerful our thoughts are, right? And one of the things that they teach some of these secret soldiers is about belief in their thoughts. And if you hang on to a thought long enough and your belief is strong enough, that thought is going to manifest itself into your reality. And this is the biggest lie to humanity, okay? And this is what I figured out for myself, is that this is why they don't want us. That's why they keep us vibrating at a low level, because we are extremely powerful beings with powers and abilities beyond people's imagination. We can do things, people can do things, people can heal themselves, right? We can turn our genes on and off. People can levitate, people can do telekinesis, people can do telepathy, people can do stigmata, people can do espousal. So we can do all of these things. Now, if all of those people can do that, hey, you have the power inside you to do the same exact thing, okay? And this is what they don't want us to find out, is how powerful you are. Because if we're powerful and we find out who we really are and reconnect with that higher aspect in ourselves, the game's over. They don't want
Absolutely.
us to discover that.
You cannot control people who have been empowered. You cannot control people who choose love over fear, who
Right.
choose love over hate. It's easy
Absolutely.
to control people who are in a state of fear, in a state of hate. They want to be in a state of denial. It's pretty easy to control them. You
Yeah,
just feed them what they want to hear,
absolutely.
will feed into their beliefs.
Mhm.
But you take a person who has chosen their self-love, their
Right.
self-empowerment, they have chosen to be their own individual, not a programmed walking person. They can't be controlled. They don't buy into the fear and the anger that the media presents. So what you're saying makes powerful sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll show you some more proof if you like. So Dr. Masaru Emoto, are you familiar with him?
Not so much.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Masaru Emoto was a Japanese researcher, and basically what he did is he took water and he would use different tools like photographs, music, words, prayer, thoughts, vibrations. And then what he would do is he would freeze this water. He would put those things by it. If it was a word or vibration, he might put it on it or expose the water to this. Then he freeze the water, and then he put the crystals under a microscope. And the vibrations and then what turns out is, for example, here's one right here. This is I can't. So they say I can't. This is what the water crystal looks like under the microscope. Okay, it breaks out, right? But if you notice inside there, it looks like there's something else that is coming out, right? So it looks like even though it's broken, there's something within there that looks like it's kind of regenerating itself again. Now, this is the water crystal where he says, I can, right? Beautiful. I can. I can't. I can. So this goes to show, like, what did Henry Ford say? If you think you can or you can't, you're right. And it's absolutely true,
Yes.
right? So this is one of the things that we need to realize. Now, if our thoughts can do this to water crystals, and we're thinking about how bad we feel about ourselves, right? Or how good we feel about ourselves, what are our thoughts doing to us? So when we have all that negative self-talk, we're just pounding ourselves in the ground. It's kind of like we're torturing ourselves. We don't even realize how much we're damaging ourselves. It's amazing.
If people don't, I think that if
Yeah.
people saw how much they injured themselves with every negative thought, every negative action, every negative perception, belief, if people saw that, if they could look in the mirror and see those injuries, they would stop. They would
Absolutely.
absolutely stop. But most people don't see that. They don't see that energy. They see their physical reflection, but they don't see that energy, and they might feel like they feel a little down or a little sad or depressed or fearful, but they just keep repeating that
Right.
same tendency. Now, you talk a lot about this in your book. Where can people find your book and more information on you?
They can get my book on Amazon, and my website is robertjcrown.com. I'm also on Instagram and on Facebook, but only the brave can go on Facebook.
And then also the title of your book, so people can find it on Amazon.
Oh, yeah, it's Suffering Ends When Awakening Begins.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Robert, so much for being on my show today.
Thank you for having me, Tammy.
And thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us as well here on Journey for Truth. You could also visit my website, empowermentthroughhealing.org. Until next time, have a fantastic week.